Look, I'm George Conway, and I need to tell you about something that happened yesterday that should be dominating every news cycle but is being deliberately buried by right wing media. November 12th, 2025. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released three new emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate emails that directly contradict Trump's decade long narrative that he barely knew Epstein and had no knowledge of Epstein's crimes. These aren't rumors. These aren't allegations. These are Epstein's own words, written to his convicted sex trafficking partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, and to author Michael Wolff, saying explicitly that Trump knew about the girls and that a victim of Epstein's sex trafficking spent hours at my house with Trump. Let me be absolutely clear about what we're looking at here. In the 2nd of April 2011 email, that's 2 years after Epstein was released from his joke of an 18-month prison sentence for soliciting prostitution from a minor, Epstein wrote to Maxwell, "I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I am 75% there." Maxwell responded, "I have been thinking about that. The victim's name was redacted by Democrats to protect her identity, but Republicans on the committee later identified her as Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent survivors who tragically died by suicide in April 2025. Now, the White House and Republicans immediately went into damage control mode. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt claimed Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. She said Giuffre repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever and couldn't have been friendlier to her in their limited interactions. That's technically true. Giuffre never accused Trump of abusing her, and she did describe him as friendly in her posthumous memoir, Nobody's Girl. But here's what Leavitt conveniently leaves out. Giuffre's family has been critical of Trump, telling The Atlantic earlier this year that Trump's comments about Epstein makes us ask if he was aware of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal actions. The second email is even more damning. In a 2019 message to author Michael Wolff, who was writing his fourth book about Trump's presidency, Epstein wrote, "Of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop." Read that again. Epstein, in 2019, 4 years into Trump's political career, explicitly stated that Trump knew about the girls, the underage victims Epstein was trafficking, and that Trump had asked Maxwell to stop. The email is partially redacted, but in the middle of a redacted sentence, you can clearly read Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida, where Giuffre worked as a spa attendant in 2000 when Maxwell recruited her. This directly contradicts Trump's long-standing claim that he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep to his female employees. Trump's version has always been, "I barely knew Epstein socially. I had no idea what he was doing. And as soon as I found out he was inappropriate with young women at my club, I banned him immediately." But Epstein's email says Trump knew and asked Maxwell to stop, meaning Trump knew about the trafficking operation, and his response wasn't to call the police or FBI, but to ask Epstein's accomplice to stop recruiting at his club. That's not the behavior of someone who's shocked and appalled by criminal activity. That's the behavior of someone managing a PR problem. The third email is from the 15th of December, 2015, right in the middle of Trump's first presidential campaign. Wolff wrote to Epstein, "I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards." This was the night of the fifth Republican primary debate hosted by CNN. Epstein responded, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" Wolff's reply is chilling in its calculation. "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt." Let me translate that from sociopath into English. Wolff is advising Epstein to let Trump lie publicly about their relationship, specifically about whether Trump had been on Epstein's private plane, the Lolita Express, or at Epstein's house. If Trump lies and Epstein has evidence contradicting those lies, Epstein can use that evidence for leverage, either to destroy Trump if he's politically inconvenient or to extract favors if Trump wins the presidency. This is textbook blackmail strategy being discussed in writing. And for the record, CNN never asked Trump about Epstein during that debate, according to PBS News' review of transcripts and video. Now, these 3 emails are part of 23,000 documents that Epstein's estate has turned over to the House Oversight Committee in response to a subpoena issued earlier this year. 23,000 documents. We've seen 3 Rep. Robert Garcia, the ranking Democrat on the committee, said in a statement, "The more Donald Trump tries to cover up the Epstein files, the more we uncover." These latest emails and correspondence raise glaring questions about what else the White House is hiding and the nature of the relationship between Epstein and the president. And here's where it gets even more interesting politically. The timing of this release wasn't accidental. Yesterday morning, Rep-elect Adelita Grijalva was sworn into office after an historic 50-day delay. She ran on a promise to sign a bipartisan discharge petition spearheaded by Reps. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna-Tue to force a House vote on compelling the Department of Justice to release all Epstein-related files. With Grijalva's signature, that petition now has the 218 signatures needed to force a vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson had refused to schedule the vote, which critics on both sides of the aisle viewed as an attempt to protect Trump and other powerful figures mentioned in the files. Think about the irony here. Trump campaigned in 2024 on releasing the Epstein files. He positioned himself as the truth teller who would expose the elite pedophile network. His supporters, many of them QAnon believers who think Democrats run a child trafficking cabal, cheered this promise. But now that Trump's back in office and has full control of the Justice Department, he's doing everything possible to keep those files buried. In July, Trump posted on Truth Social that the push for Epstein file release was a Democratic hoax and scam, and that his past supporters have bought into this B. Hook, line, and sinker. That's Trump admitting his own supporters want the files released and calling them stupid for wanting it, but he can't stop the pressure. In September, the House Judiciary Committee said whistleblower information indicated that Ghislaine Maxwell is working on filing a commutation application with the Trump administration. Maxwell is currently serving 20 years in federal prison for sex trafficking minors for Epstein. If Trump commutes her sentence or pardons her, the implications are catastrophic. Why would he do that unless she has leverage over him? Unless she knows things that would destroy him if they became public? And before you say, George, you're being conspiratorial, let me remind you of the established facts. Trump and Epstein were close friends for at least 15 years, from the late 1980 seconds through the mid-2000s. There are dozens of photos of them together at parties, including a 1,992 video that recently resurfaced showing just Trump, Epstein, and a group of young women at Mar-a-Lago, with Trump and Epstein pointing at women and laughing. In a 2002 New York Magazine profile, Trump said of Epstein, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." On the younger side. Trump knew. That quote alone shows he knew Epstein's preference for young women. And when you combine that 2002 quote with Epstein's 2019 email saying Trump knew about the girls, with the 2011 email saying a victim spent hours at Epstein's house with Trump, with the evidence that Giuffre was recruited from Trump's club, the pattern becomes undeniable. Trump wasn't some peripheral figure who showed up at a few parties. He was deeply enmeshed in Epstein's social world during the exact period when Epstein was trafficking minors. Trump's defense has always been, "I kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago decades ago when I found out he was inappropriate." But when did that happen? Trump has never given a specific date. Epstein's 2011 email, written 2 years after Epstein was convicted and served his laughable 13-month sentence as a victim, spent hours with Trump at Epstein's house and has never once been mentioned by Trump. If Trump had really banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for being a predator, why was Epstein in 2011 noting with apparent relief that Trump hadn't mentioned this victim to authorities? Why would Epstein need to be relieved unless Trump knew things that could incriminate Epstein? Here's what I think happened based on the documentary record. Trump and Epstein were close friends and party buddies through the 1,990 seconds and early 2000s. Trump knew Epstein liked younger women because that's how he described it in 2002. Epstein recruited young women from Mar-a-Lago, including Virginia Giuffre. Trump either didn't care or looked the other way because Epstein was wealthy, connected, and useful. At some point, probably after Epstein's 2008 conviction became public, Trump realized the association was politically toxic. So he claimed he'd banned Epstein years earlier, backdating his moral stand to make it look like he'd acted on principle rather than PR. But Epstein's private emails show that as of 2011, Epstein wasn't worried about Trump cooperating with investigators. And as of 2019, Epstein believed Trump knew about the girls. The Epstein emails released yesterday don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of a pattern of behavior by Trump that spans decades. Befriend powerful criminals, benefit from those relationships, deny everything when they're exposed, attack anyone who investigates, and use legal warfare to suppress evidence. Let me walk you through how this pattern is played out specifically with the Epstein case, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Start with Trump's initial denials. When Epstein was first arrested in July 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges, Trump was asked about their relationship. He said, "I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan." Notice the vagueness. A long time ago. Not a specific date, not a specific reason, just enough to create distance without making falsifiable claims. When pressed on whether he knew about Epstein's behavior, Trump said, "I was not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein." And you're talking about a long time ago, and now, just so you understand, if you look at Jeffrey Epstein, if you really look at Jeffrey Epstein, there are many people who knew him and who may have been involved. That being said, I'm not involved and I'm not a fan of his. Classic Trump obfuscation. Many people were involved. I'm not involved. And the passive construction may have been involved to avoid naming names or making specific accusations. But here's the problem. That 2002 New York Magazine quote proves Trump was a fan. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. Those are Trump's own words from 17 years before Epstein's federal arrest. And the timeline matters. Epstein's Florida case became public in 2006. He pleaded guilty in 2008 to state charges. He was released in 2009. Trump's claim in 2019 that he hadn't spoken to Epstein in 15 years would place their falling out in 2004 before Epstein's crimes became publicly known. But Epstein's 2011 email to Maxwell undermines even that timeline. If Trump had truly cut ties with Epstein before 2004, why was Epstein in 2011, 7 years later, noting with apparent satisfaction that Trump hadn't mentioned a victim who spent hours at Epstein's house with Trump? You don't track whether someone is mentioning your victims unless that person knows about your victims. And you don't feel relief that they're not cooperating with investigators unless you have reason to worry they might. Now let's look at Trump's legal warfare around this issue. In September 2025, Trump filed a libel lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and the reporters who wrote about a collection of letters gifted to Epstein for his 50th birthday in 2003. One of those letters included a note bearing Trump's name and an outline of a naked woman. The Journal reported this as evidence of Trump's friendship with Epstein during the period when Epstein was actively trafficking minors. Trump claims he never sent the card, never drew the image, and that the Journal defamed him by suggesting he did.